In the brutal heat of 1879 Arizona Territory, Celeste Martinez endures 200 lashes for the crime of being childless, her back torn raw, while the town watches in righteous satisfaction. But when a mysterious widower with 5 children steps from the crowd to challenge everything the townspeople believe about worth and redemption, will one act of defiance be enough to transform a woman marked as cursed into something as resilient and beautiful as the desert morning glories that refuse to die? The whip screamed through the desert air like an angry snake. Celeste Martinez bit down on the leather strap between her teeth so hard she thought it might break. Around her, the people of Salvation Ridge watched with faces carved from stone. 98! Shouted Reverend Caldwell, his black coat soaking with sweat under the Arizona Sunday. 99! The leather found her back again, and Celeste's knees buckled against the rough adobe wall of the mission. In the crowd, old Mrs. Patterson shook her head sadly. 3 years, married and not one baby, she whispered to her neighbor. God's judgment is clear as desert sky. Celeste had heard those words before. Every month when her courses came, every Sunday when she sat alone in church, every time she walked past the schoolyard where children played. The year was 1879, and in this harsh land where families needed many hands to survive, a woman who couldn't bear children was seen as broken. 100! The Reverend's voice boomed across the dusty courtyard. Miguel Santos, Celeste's husband, stood with his arms crossed. His dark eyes held no pity. She shames our family, he had told the town council. God has marked her as cursed. Celeste's vision blurred, but she could still see the purple morning glory vine climbing the mission wall. Despite the burning heat and lack of rain, those flowers bloomed every day. They were stubborn, beautiful, alive. 150. The crowd shifted restlessly. Even in Salvation Ridge, where justice came swift and hard, this seemed too much. But no one spoke up. No one challenged the Reverend's authority. At the back of the gathering, a tall man in dusty leather clothes watched with growing anger. Josiah Reed had buried his wife 2 years ago when their youngest son was born. He knew loss. He knew pain. But this was cruelty, dressed up as righteousness. Behind him, his 5 children huddled close. Mary, 16 and wise beyond her years, covered little Timothy's eyes. The boy was only 4 and didn't understand why the nice lady from the market was being hurt. 175. Celeste's legs finally gave out completely. She slumped against the wall, her dark hair hanging like a curtain around her face. The leather strap fell from her mouth, and a small whimper escaped her lips. Please, she whispered, though she wasn't sure if she was talking to God, the Reverend, or the desert wind that carried her words away. The morning glory vine rustled in the breeze, its purple flowers opening wider, as if reaching for something better than this moment. Celeste wished she could be like those flowers, strong enough to grow in impossible places. But could even the toughest desert bloom survive 200 lashes of judgment? Stop. The word cut through the desert heat like a blade through butter. All eyes turned toward the voice. Josiah Reed stepped forward, his boots raising small clouds of dust with each step. Behind him, his children formed a nervous line. Mary, with her serious brown eyes. 12-year-old Samuel, clutching his younger brother's hand. 8-year-old Luke, trying to look brave, and little Timothy, peeking around his father's legs. Reverend Caldwell's arm froze in mid-swing. His face turned red as a sunset. This is no business of yours, Reed. This woman has defied the Lord's will. The Lord's will? Josiah's gray eyes swept over Celeste's crumpled form. Looks more like man's cruelty to me. A gasp rippled through the crowd. Nobody challenged Reverend Caldwell. Not in Salvation Ridge, where his word was law and his punishments were final. Miguel Santos stepped forward, his fists clenched. She's my wife, Reed. My shame to bear. Your wife? Josiah knelt beside Celeste, checking for signs of life. Her breathing was shallow but steady. A man protects his wife. He doesn't serve her up for public beating. She's barren. Miguel spat the word like poison. 23 years old and empty as a broken well. What use is a woman who can't give children? Something dangerous flickered in Josiah's eyes. He had loved his Clara deeply, not for the babies she could bear, but for who she was. When fever took her after Timothy's birth, he mourned the woman, not the womb. "Can you stand, miss?" he asked Celeste softly. She lifted her head slowly. Through swollen eyes she saw kindness where she expected judgment. "Why?" she whispered. "Why help me?" "Because it's right," Josiah said simply. Dr. Williams pushed through the crowd, his medical bag bouncing against his hip. The old man had delivered half the children in Salvation Ridge, including Josiah's 5. "This has gone far enough, Reverend. She needs medical attention." "She needs God's correction," Caldwell's voice thundered across the courtyard. But something had changed in the crowd's mood. Women began whispering among themselves. Men shuffled their feet uncomfortably. Even Mrs. Patterson looked troubled. "Papa," little Timothy tugged on Josiah's coat, "is the lady going to die?" The innocent question hung in the air like smoke from a campfire. Everyone could see that Celeste was barely conscious, her back torn and bleeding. "Not if I can help it, son," Josiah said loud enough for everyone to hear. He stood and faced the crowd with the same calm strength he used to gentle wild horses. "This woman has been punished enough. Any man here who thinks different can answer to me." The challenge was clear. In the Arizona Territory, a man's word was his bond, and his strength was his law. Josiah Reed was known as fair but fearless, not someone most folks wanted to cross. Miguel's face twisted with rage, but he didn't step forward. Neither did anyone else. What would happen next in this dusty town, where mercy was rarer than desert rain? Wooden shutters slammed against the adobe walls, as desert winds howled through Salvation Ridge 3 days after the whipping. Celeste sat on the edge of a narrow cot in Doc Williams' small clinic, her fingers tracing the wilted morning glory that little Timothy had given her. The flower had somehow stayed alive, despite having no water, just like she had. Heavy boots echoed on the wooden floor outside her door. She knew those footsteps now, steady, purposeful, different from the angry stomping of the townspeople who whispered curses as they passed. Josiah Reed appeared in the doorway, his weathered hat clutched in both hands like he was entering a church. "Ma'am, I've been thinking about something important," he said, settling his tall frame onto a rickety wooden chair. "My children need help, and you need a place where people won't judge you for things that ain't your fault." Celeste turned her face toward the small window where dust devils danced in the afternoon heat. "Mr. Reed, I bring nothing but trouble wherever I go. Your family doesn't need that kind of burden." "Burden?" Josiah's gray eyes widened with surprise. "Lady, you've been carrying everyone else's burdens for years. Time someone helped carry yours." Outside, she could hear children playing in the street, their laughter mixing with the distant sound of hammers from the blacksmith shop where her husband Miguel still worked. The life she'd known was gone forever, broken like an egg that could never be put back together. "What exactly are you offering?" she asked quietly. Josiah leaned forward, his voice growing earnest. "A fair trade. You help with my 5 young ones, cooking, teaching, keeping house, and I give you protection, food, and a roof over your head. Nothing more than that, unless you wanted it someday." He paused, watching her face carefully. "You'd have your own room, your own space. No one would own you or tell you what you're worth, island." Little Timothy's head peeked around the doorframe, his blue eyes bright with curiosity. "Papa, is this the flower lady?" "Yes, son. This is Miss Celeste." The boy stepped forward shyly, pulling another morning glory from behind his back. This one was fresh, purple petals still damp with morning dew. "I found this one by the well. It was growing right through a crack in the stone." Celeste accepted the flower with trembling hands, and for the first time in days, something warm stirred in her chest. But even as hope began to bloom, she wondered what the people of Salvation Ridge would say about such an unusual arrangement. 6 weeks later, The sound of children's laughter filled the Reed homestead as Celeste chased 4-year-old Timothy around the kitchen table, flour dusting both their faces like snow. The morning sun streamed through clean windows, casting golden squares on the wooden floor that little feet had polished smooth with years of running. "Got you!" she cried, scooping the giggling boy into her arms just as his father walked through the front door. Josiah stopped in the doorway, a stack of papers clutched in his work-roughened hands. His face had gone pale as desert sand, and sweat beaded on his forehead despite the cool morning air. "Everything all right?" Celeste asked, setting Timothy down and wiping flour from her apron. "These came from the cattle buyers in Phoenix," Josiah said, his voice tight with worry. "They want to change our deal, but I can't make heads or tails of all these fancy words." Celeste took the papers, her eyes scanning the neat handwriting quickly. Her father had taught her to read contracts when she was just 8 years old, back when he thought she might help him with his teaching business someday. "They're trying to cheat you," she said after a moment. "This new contract pays half what they promised, and it makes you responsible for any cattle that die on the trail to market." Josiah sank into a chair like a man who'd been punched in the stomach. "Without that money, we'll lose the ranch by winter. I can't even read well enough to know when folks are lying to me." 8-year-old Samuel appeared in the kitchen doorway, his face serious beyond his years. "Miss Celeste, could you teach Papa his letters like you've been teaching me?" "I don't want to be a bother," Josiah started. But Celeste was already shaking her head. "No bother at all. My father always said reading was the best tool a person could own." She moved to the shelf and pulled down one of Samuel's school books. "We'll start tonight after supper." 16-year-old Mary came running in from the yard, her face flushed with excitement. "Papa, Mr. Henderson from the general store is riding up the path, and he's got someone with him I ain't never seen before." Through the window, they could see 2 riders approaching fast, dust clouds trailing behind their horses. The stranger wore a black coat despite the heat, and something about the way he sat, his horse made Celeste's stomach tighten with old fear. "Looks like trouble," Josiah muttered, reaching for the rifle that hung above the fireplace. But what kind of trouble was heading their way? And would Celeste's presence make it better or worse? "Papa, there's someone coming fast!" Mary's voice cut through the morning air like a knife. She stood on the porch steps, shading her eyes against the bright Sunday. Dust clouds rose from the desert trail, growing bigger by the minute. Josiah dropped the fence post he was fixing and grabbed his rifle from against the barn wall. "Children, get inside. Now." His voice was calm but firm. Little Timothy started to argue, but one look at his father's face made him scurry toward the house. The riders came hard and fast, 5 men on sweating horses, their faces twisted with anger. Miguel Santos led them, a whiskey bottle swinging from his saddle horn. Behind him rode his 3 brothers, and old Pete Hawkins, who owned the general store in town. "Reed!" Miguel's voice cracked like thunder across the yard. His horse danced sideways, foam dripping from its mouth. "You got something that belongs to me." From the kitchen window, Celeste watched the scene unfold. Her hands shook as she gripped the wooden counter. She had feared this day would come. The peace of the last 2 months felt like a dream that was about to turn into a nightmare. "Miguel, you're drunk," Josiah called out, his rifle held low but ready. "Turn around and go home before you do something stupid." "Stupid?" Miguel laughed, but there was no joy in the sound. "What's stupid is letting that cursed woman poison your house." He took a long drink from his bottle, then threw it into the dirt where it shattered into 1,000 pieces. "She's barren, Reed. Barren as a dead tree. And now she's making your whole family sick with her curse." Young Samuel peeked through the curtains upstairs. His heart pounded so hard he thought everyone could hear it. He had never seen his papa look so worried. "The woman made her choice," Josiah said, taking a step forward. "She's under my protection now. That's the end of it." "Protection?" Pete Hawkins spat tobacco juice into the dust. "You're harboring a woman who defied God's judgment. The whole town's talking about it." Celeste closed her eyes tight. This was exactly what she had been afraid of. Her presence was bringing danger to the family that had shown her nothing but kindness. Through the thin walls, she could hear little Timothy crying upstairs. "We ain't leaving without her," growled Carlos Santos, Miguel's oldest brother. "She needs to face proper punishment for running away." The standoff stretched like a tight rope ready to snap. Josiah knew he was outnumbered, but he also knew he couldn't let them take Celeste. Not after seeing what they had already done to her. "You got 1 minute to think about this, Reed," Miguel said, his voice turning cold. "Then we're coming in to get her ourselves." Inside the house, Celeste made a decision that would change everything. She couldn't let these good people suffer because of her past. Moving quietly, she slipped out the back door and into the desert, leaving behind only a hastily written note. "She's gone." Mary's voice was barely a whisper as she held up the piece of paper. The dangerous men had left an hour ago, promising to return with more help. Now the Reed family stood in Celeste's empty room, staring at the neat bed and the few belongings she had left behind. Josiah took the note with trembling fingers. The words were written in Celeste's careful hand. "I have gone where I can bring no more harm. Please don't follow me. Thank you for showing me kindness. Take care of each other. See." "Papa, we have to find her," Samuel said, his young voice breaking with worry. "She doesn't understand. We want her here." But Josiah's face had gone white as he read the note again. He knew exactly where Celeste had gone. There was only one place in the desert where desperate people went when they wanted to disappear forever. "Saddle Thunder," he told Mary urgently, "and send Timothy to get Doc Williams. Tell him to meet us at Copper Canyon." The old copper mine had been abandoned for 3 years after a cave-in killed 2 workers. Now it sat like a dark mouth in the side of the canyon wall, dangerous and forgotten. People whispered that it was haunted by the spirits of the dead miners. Josiah rode hard across the desert floor, his heart pounding with fear. The sun beat down mercilessly, but he barely felt the heat. All he could think about was Celeste standing at the edge of that dark hole, believing that she was worth nothing. When he reached the canyon, he saw Thunder tied to a scraggly tree near the mine entrance. His boots echoed against the rock walls as he climbed toward the opening. The silence was broken only by the sound of his own breathing and the distant cry of a hawk circling overhead. "Celeste?" His voice bounced off the canyon walls. "Celeste, I know you're in there." He found her standing at the edge of the main shaft, looking down into the blackness below. Her dark hair hung loose around her shoulders, and her simple dress fluttered in the hot desert wind. "Don't come any closer, Josiah." Her voice was calm, too calm. "This is the only way to end the trouble I've brought you." "The only trouble you've brought me," Josiah said carefully, taking one small step forward, "is making me realize how empty my house was before you came." Celeste turned to look at him, tears streaming down her face. "I'm not worth all this fighting. I'm not worth anything. The whole town knows it." "The town?" Josiah laughed, but it was a sad sound. "The town doesn't live in my house. The town doesn't help Timothy with his bad dreams or teach Samuel his letters. The town doesn't make Mary laugh when she's missing her mother." Behind them, the sound of approaching horses echoed through the canyon, but this time Josiah didn't reach for his gun. The old copper mine swallowed sounds like a hungry beast. Celeste stood at the black hole's edge, her bare feet gripping the crumbling rocks. Far below, water dripped into darkness that seemed to have no bottom. "Step away from there." Josiah's voice came from behind her, steady but scared. His horse snorted nervously, sensing danger in the air. "You don't understand," Celeste whispered without turning around. "Miguel is coming with his brothers. The whole town thinks I'm cursed. Every day I stay, your children get hurt more." A small stone broke loose under her foot and fell into the pit. She never heard it hit bottom. "My children need you alive, not dead." Josiah moved closer, his boots scraping against loose gravel. "Timothy cries for you when he has bad dreams. Mary asks for your advice about everything." Samuel won't eat anyone else's cornbread. Celeste finally turned to face him. Tears cut clean tracks through the dust on her cheeks. But I can't give them what matters most. I can't give them brothers and sisters. I can't grow your family. You already have. Josiah stopped just an arm's length away. His gray eyes held hers without blinking. Before you came, we were 5 people living in the same house. Now we're a family. The sound of horses thundered up the canyon. Miguel's angry voice bounced off the rock walls like ricocheting bullets. She's here somewhere. Find her. Celeste stepped backward toward the mine shaft. See? I bring nothing but trouble. Wait. Josiah held up his hand. Something had changed in his face. I need to tell you something I should have said weeks ago. He took a deep breath. I love you, Celeste. Not because you might give me children. Not because you cook or clean or help with the ranch books. I love you because you're brave enough to protect morning glory flowers in the desert. Because you read bedtime stories with different voices for every character. Because you saw worth in my broken family when everyone else saw only problems. Miguel appeared at the canyon entrance, his face red with anger and whiskey. 3 of his brothers rode behind him, along with Reverend Caldwell and 2 other townmen. Their horses' hooves struck sparks against the stone. There she is. Miguel pointed a shaking finger at Celeste. The cursed woman who runs from her rightful punishment. But Reverend Caldwell dismounted slowly, his weathered face thoughtful. Miguel, wait. The old preacher had been praying hard about this situation for weeks. Something in his heart had been changing, like ice melting in spring sunshine. I've been wrong, the Reverend said quietly. His words carried clearly in the desert air. We've all been wrong. Miguel spun around to stare at him. What are you talking about? God doesn't curse women for being childless. Reverend Caldwell walked toward Celeste with careful steps. I've been reading my Bible more carefully. There are many ways to serve. Many ways to be a mother without giving birth. That's crazy talk, Miguel sputtered. She's my wife. She belongs to me. No, Celeste said, her voice growing stronger. I belong to myself, and I choose to belong here. She looked at Josiah, then at the men who had come to drag her back. I choose love over fear. The canyon fell silent, except for the wind whistling through the rocks. 6 months after the confrontation at the copper mine, spring flowers painted the desert in colors nobody expected. Celeste knelt in her garden behind the reed house, her hands deep in rich soil that had taken all winter to build up with compost and care. Mama Celeste, look what I found! 4-year-old Timothy ran toward her carrying something cupped in his small palms. He had started calling her Mama Celeste, without anyone teaching him the words. She wiped her dirty hands on her apron and accepted his gift. A perfect morning glory seed, dark and wrinkled like a tiny brain. Where did this come from, little one? The wind brought it from town, Timothy said seriously. Maybe it wants to live here with us. From the porch, Josiah watched his wife work with their children. Yes, their children now. Last month, Judge Patterson had come through on his circuit, and Josiah and Celeste had married properly with all 5 children as witnesses. Not because the law demanded it, but because their hearts did. Papa, the cattle buyers are here, 16-year-old Mary called from the house. She wore a new blue dress that Celeste had sewn, and her hair was braided with ribbons. The young man from town had been calling more often lately. Josiah nodded and headed toward the men waiting by their wagon. Thanks to Celeste's careful record-keeping and letter-writing, they now had contracts with buyers from as far away as California. The ranch was not just surviving anymore. It was growing strong. Mr. Reed, called the lead buyer, tipping his hat. We've heard good things about your operation. Your wife's letters are more detailed than any we receive. She knows cattle business better than most men. Pride warmed Josiah's chest. Celeste had thrown herself into learning everything about ranching with the same determination she had once used to survive her marriage to Miguel. She studied animal care, tracked market prices, and wrote letters to buyers in 2 languages. Back in town, things had changed too. Reverend Caldwell preached new sermons about different kinds of service to God. Miguel had stopped drinking and found work on a ranch 2 counties away, finally admitting that his anger had never really been about children at all. It had been about his own fears of not being man enough. "Celeste," Josiah called to his wife, "come meet these gentlemen." She stood up, brushing soil from her hands. Her back still carried scars from that terrible day almost a year ago, but she no longer tried to hide them. They were part of her story now, proof of what she had survived. "Gentlemen," she said with confidence, "let's discuss your needs." As the sun set behind the mountains, the family gathered on the porch for evening prayers. Celeste held Timothy on her lap, while the older children pressed close on either side. Josiah's strong voice thanked God for the day's blessings and the love that had grown among them. The morning glory vines that now covered the entire east wall of the house released their sweet scent into the desert air. Some people said you couldn't grow such delicate flowers in harsh country. Those people had never met Celeste Martinez Reed, who had learned that the most beautiful things often grew strongest in the places where others said nothing good could survive. In the distance, thunder promised rain for tomorrow's planting.